I've got a question for you. How did your mother comfort you when you were a child after you had a nightmare? I can't say that I had all that many nightmares, but I did have a few, and the ones that I had were pretty scary. There are two in particular that I've never forgotten. I think about them almost every day, even though it's been almost 60 years since I've had them. The scariest one, the one that I remember the most vividly, is the one that I had soon after my father died. My father died a sad, a broken alcoholic, all alone at the age of 46 years old. I was only 10, and I thought it was completely normal to have a drunken father passed out on the couch all day long without a job, with a mother who went to work every day and hid the grocery money in various parts of the house so Daddy wouldn't find it and take it and go drink with it, and so that we would have enough money for groceries. I thought all that was normal. Didn't see a problem with it. My mother left my father 4 years before he died when I was only 6 years old. I was never embarrassed to have a drunken, passed out father, but I was sure embarrassed to have to go to school and be the only one whose father didn't live at home. That was mortifying. It's the first time, but not the last, that I remember consciously being ashamed of who I was and where I came from. So it wasn't too long after he died when I had that really scary nightmare about him. I dreamt I was sitting on the front porch of the apartment building where we lived, which was another source of shame and embarrassment for me because everybody I knew lived in a house. We were the only ones who lived in an apartment. So as I was sitting on the porch, I dreamt my father came up and approached me at the bottom of the porch. He stopped, but he didn't try to come up the steps. And I think it was because the last conscious memory I have of my father when he was alive was the night that he tried to break into our apartment because he had been thrown out of the rooming house where he had lived. And I remember my mother trying to keep me quiet, closed the windows and curtains in the hopes that he would think that we weren't home and would go away. Well, anyway, as I was saying, my father approached the stairs and he looked at me sitting on the porch. And then we began to have the nicest of conversations. It was so sweet. He asked me how I was doing in school and what my friends were doing. Stuff like that. Questions he never asked me when he was alive because, well, he was always drunk and passed out. He never asked me anything, at least not that I can remember. In the dream, I remember this feeling of him expressing love and tenderness for me. And then, all of a sudden, without warning, I remembered that he wasn't alive anymore. And I screamed at him, "You can't be here. Daddy's dead. Go away." And then, in my dream, suddenly everything went very black. No light at all. I was in complete darkness, and my heart was pounding. I couldn't see anything, and then I heard scary loud music, the kind of music that you hear in those horror movies when some scary, unseen, dangerous monster is approaching from somewhere. And then I heard the sound of footsteps echoing behind me, and they were coming toward me. And then the next thing I knew, I was awake and screaming, shivering and standing in the doorway of my bedroom. And then my mother came to comfort me in the middle of the night. As I related the nightmare to her, I remember the look on her face. It was a look of motherly love, but it was also mixed with bewilderment. I know that she was pained to see me suffer like that, And I know she wanted to take away my suffering, but I also knew she had no words to comfort me. How do you stop a nightmare? What words of comfort can you say anyway? It was only a dream. Well, that seems so inadequate, and I think she knew that. Finally, she said, tenderly, the next time something like that happens, just say 3 Hail Marys and everything will be all right. Well, you have to know my mother to know that that response was so out of character for her. But it was the most comforting thing that she could have said. My mother was a Catholic, but she never went to church, nor did she teach me anything about our religion. In fact, I always remember how angry she was toward the church. But she never really said why. Later on, as I grew older, she sent me to church, but I always knew that was just to get me out of the house on Sunday mornings so she could be alone with her boyfriend. But that's a different story, and I'll save that one for another time. But looking back, I feel my mother was truly at a loss of words to say something comforting, and the only thing she could think of was something godlike, and I'm thankful for it. I've learned in life that when faced with our nightmares, either awake or sleeping, no one but God is really going to comfort us anyway. Our loved ones may want to, and our loved ones may try, but when it comes right down to it, we really are alone. It is always just us and God. No human power. And remembering that night, I know that it is true. Recently, a friend of mine told me he could feel my mother's energy. It might be true. My mother was the strongest woman I ever knew. She still is, even in death. My friend told me that when I needed guidance, all I had to do was to call on her spirit and she would be there to help me. Well, I have to say I'm not so sure about that one. Not to say anything not nice about my mother, but in life she was not much of a guider. In death, maybe. I'll have to try to keep an open mind. But I have been doing something for many years now as part of my nightly ritual before going to sleep. And although I'm no longer Catholic and I haven't stepped foot in a Catholic church in many decades, every night I say 3 Hail Marys as my last prayer before getting into bed. It is, in fact, a tribute to all the mothers in the world who love us and guide us, and to my own mother who gave me love and comfort one very scary night a long, long time ago. I'm Stephen Nicola. Thank you for joining me. Say 3 Hail Marys, and everything will be all right.